Cthulhu Wars Duel. This is the Duel, so two-player only version of a game that you may already know, Cthulhu Wars. I never played it actually, so I will not be able to compare the two versions. I've seen it played at conventions from time to time, and it looks so huge and with so many minis that I just didn't feel like getting a second mortgage on my house to acquire a copy or start selling organs to the Colombian mafia. Boy, this review has taken a grim turn right on. So let's talk about cheerful stuff. In this game, you are one of the great old ones that wants to destroy the world, and you're gonna bring waves of madness, pain, and despair on this poor sick planet of ours. One player will control Cthulhu and the forces of Cthulhu, and the other will be Shub-Niggurath, the Black Goat, and also the forces that want to summon the Black Goat. It's a highly asymmetrical game as the two factions work in very different ways. So this is the board of the game where the mess will happen. It's divided into regions. Some are lands, some are water, but for most game purposes, they work exactly the same. Each player has cultists represented by these flat tokens here, red and green, respectively. And then you also have cardboard miniatures representing the star spawn, the whatchamacallem, the fish people, and then of course the big baddie himself. And for the other faction, we also have Shub-Niggurath and a variety of other monsters that you can summon. You start with only cultists on the board with gates. Gates are super important because they will allow you to summon people. So actually, as you can see from the size of these cardboard standee, the board can get pretty cluttered, and of course after a while there's going to be madness and destruction and units being removed from there. Also, when you will be sitting, you wouldn't see it at an angle like this. I want to show the board, so I will look more like this. And of course, things were gonna fall. What did I expect? I don't know what I expected. The point is that the board can get a little cluttered, and sometimes you have to look around from different angles to make sure that, look at that, there isn't a little cultist hiding behind a monster, or a monster hiding behind a smaller monster. So there is that thing. And again, this cardboard standee, as you can see, they probably allow the game to be a little cheaper than the one with the plastic minis, but they're also a little more unstable, especially when it comes to the Dark Lord Cthulhu that slumbers in the Sunken City, or Lie. So what else? You have your faction, you have the all-important player aid that reminds you of the stats of the members of your faction here. Most importantly, the cost in terms of action points and the combat value plus other nodes, that is, the spells that they are connected with and other possible abilities, say how to awaken the big baddies. A unique ability for each faction, a power track. You will place a token here indicating how much power you have, and this is the fuel. This is the currency that you use to perform actions in the game. Also here you have a spellbooks area. Each faction has 6 slots where they can place cards representing spells or spellbooks, and they will give you different abilities. I'm going to show them to you in a minute, but first I want to show you what you need to do to be able to place a spell in that slot and basically to activate that upgrade. Shub-Niggurath likes to send people out to invade the world. It's all about the 1,000 little babies, and so as you can see, by spreading out as much as possible and performing other actions such as sacrificing your own cultists, you get to activate the spell books. So place cards there that give you upgrades, and it's good that these people go around because Cthulhu likes people to destroy them. So the part of Cthulhu is all about killing, devour, and destroying stuff. On top of the fact that they are on top of things, they just get a spell book in the first Doom phase during turn 1, just because, booyah, just for showing up. It's like when you go to a meeting and you get donuts just for showing up. Those are some of the few perks that we had in meetings before times of COVID. Now you show on Zoom and no donuts. So, we're talking about the spellbooks, and here we go. These are the spellbook cards. When you fulfill one of the conditions indicated in those player rates, you get to choose one of these abilities. And this is a really important and good one. Your cultists have 1 combat. These poor people start with a combat of 0. They're not completely useless, but they're better with 1. And you can pause and read the text if you so desire. And just to give you a sense that there will be different things that you can activate in different orders. If you do get all of your spell books out, you also get access to an extra combat ability, combat action. So there is variety here in the order in which you will activate your spell books. The main structure of the turn, what happens, the main thing that happens is that during the turn, you will spend power to trigger action, to perform actions, and the players will alternate. And so once you perform an action, you will move down the marker to indicate that you spend those points. When your opponent goes on to 0 and you still have power points, with an unfortunate name, when you have your power point, you will have to pay a penalty. So that allows a player, if a player spends all their power early on, that a player doesn't have forever if they still saved a lot of points, which allows, the game, so the first player that spent all these actions doesn't have to wait for too long, and also hoarding actions is not a great idea because they become more expensive once your opponent is down to 0. I did not find in this version, in this pre-publication version, a player aid with a summary of the regular actions. Again, you have some information here, but it is from the rulebook that we have, and only in the rulebook, as far as I can tell, the 7 common actions and basically what you can do. By spending 1 power, you can recruit a cultist that maybe was removed from the board because he or she died in battle, or you sacrifice these poor bastards for some reason. You can summon monsters. The cost varies based on what this player right here tells you. Again, these are the monsters. The term is not generic. There are abilities that apply to cultists and don't apply to monsters, and vice versa. And gates are where you summon the bad stuff. You can awaken the Great Old One for your faction, in which case you follow the procedure indicated on these player aids. You can create a gate, and it costs 3 powers and requires a cultist, and there can ever always be 1 gate, no more, in an area. That's why these cultists need to start going around so they can start opening gates right and left. Also, the map has this peculiarity that it kind of like wraps around. So this area is exactly the same as this one, and this area is exactly the same as this one. So units are always close to each other. It gets pretty close probably pretty soon, which is just as it should be, because this is not, like a farm game for your phone. It's Cthulhu Wars. So, other action, move. It costs 1 power for each unit that you move. So the cost is variable because I may choose just like boop, 1 cultist from one region to the other is 1 power point, or I can spend multiple ones, in which case then it costs 1 unit. Again, 1 point per unit. I can also spend a power point to declare a battle, which occurs when there are when there are units of both sides in the same area. It's the most complicated action in the game, and it's not that complicated. There are a couple of abilities that may trigger before the battle, but the main idea is that units have a combat value. During combat, each unit you put together all the combat values of your faction, and you get a 6-sided die for each combat point. Suppose my faction has 5, and the other faction, what are the odds? They also have 5. We roll the dice, and each 6 that we roll, because we totally rolled those 6s, no cheating at all. Each 6 that I roll is a kill, which is precisely what it sounds. It will eliminate a unit. Each result that I rolled of 5 or 6, I mean, what am I talking about? 5 or 4 is a pain, and 5 or 4 are pains, which means simply it's a retreat. You need to retreat a unit. And so basically, yeah, it can feel complicated because of the unique abilities that may play into it right before the battle, during the battle, after the battle, but at the end, it's a fairly conventional bucket of dice mechanism that you have in many other war games. Another action is, well, don't leave your cultists hanging out there doing nothing, because a monster entering areas where the cultists are alone can perform the action of capturing them. So you need your cultists to be protected by monsters to prevent your monster from just snatching them. By using the single action of capturing cultists. It's not even a battle. You just capture the poor, lonely cultist. Also, the lonely cultist captured through that action is not given back to the player, meaning placed in their pool and they can summon it again. You retain it, and at the end of the turn, you sacrifice it and basically turn it into power. Just a little bit of extra power. At the end of the turn, players have different phases. One is where you collect power based on units that you have, on gates that you have. And then you have the Doom phase, in which the players can choose to perform the ritual of Annihilation. There will be a marker here, starts on the slot number 5. And basically, if you spend that amount of power, you perform the ritual. You move the marker higher up, which makes it more expensive later in the game. You collect some extra Doom points, which ultimately are victory points. And also you move the game closer to the end. Also, you collect the Elder Signs. I don't know why the Elder Sign would be good for us, since we are the factions of the Elder Gods. Usually the Elder Sign kind of scares us away, exercises us, but actually here you will see a number of victory points. So you draw one randomly, you look at it, oh, interesting, and then you will reveal it at the end of the game. The game continues until the Ritual of Annihilation has been performed enough to reach instant death, in which case, guess what happens? Yes, the game is over. Or also, player reaches 30 Doom points, and that also the game is over. At the end of the game, the player with the most points wins the game. I hope you're all enjoying the Bob Ross experiencing homelessness look, but it's quarantine, so I have to try to avoid to the barber for as long as I can. Also, because it's quarantine, I don't have game night with my adult friends. This game, Cthulhu Wars Duel, seemed a little too complicated to play with my daughters. Not too complex. I think they wouldn't have any problem understanding the rules. Yes, as ages 8 and up, and that seems about right. My daughters are 8 and 10, and yet still I felt that with asymmetrical gameplay, with those spellbooks that bring unique effects, I just feared that the game would have felt a little too fiddly for them. It's not fiddly as a committed adult playing games. So what I did, I played the game Solitaire. It has wars in the title, so I played it the way I play many war games, which is controlling both sides to the best of my possibilities and seeing what happens. And it can still be a lot of fun to see how the action develops. And after I enjoyed this game, I enjoyed it quite a bit, and it works well even in that format. Although after you play it, you almost wonder if the title is a bit of a misnomer. You're gonna fight, you're gonna destroy stuff, but it really feels Cthulhu area control duel with some wars here and there. Because ultimately, especially at Shub-Niggurath, as much as you can, you're gonna try to avoid confrontation, because you score more points, you fulfill more objectives, get more spells by getting out there and simply spamming the world, littering the world with your cultists and your monsters and your gates. But then Cthulhu comes around and starts breaking stuff. So there is at least one side that has that incentive. And so you will have that element, but ultimately it mainly feels like an area control game, like a there's a Eurogame core with an unusual horror theme, but then also with combat mechanics. That can be pretty chaotic, it can be pretty swingy, and there can be, again, other elements that give you a sense of chaos, of many things going on at the same time. Again, in this sense, it's not a game that I feel like playing with young gamers, because while I think they can understand the rules, I think the strategy will feel a little complicated and just will feel confusing to them. The game has a certain architecture that doesn't feel scripted, although game after game you will have certain things that will tend to happen. Early on, you want to collect power, you want to create gates, you want to bring monsters there, because what are you gonna use to take control of areas? What are you gonna use to destroy the units of the opponent? So really have a build up of units, and again, the first turn or two may not feel much like a war game at all, which again in essence it doesn't. Okay, it may not feel much like an area game with combat, just like an area control game. And then the world starts feeling crowded, and you're spending one area, and then you remember that the area folds around, and it's also the other area, and so fighting is gonna happen. The big baddies are gonna come on the board. So it's nice that the game has a sense of progression. You don't do the same thing over and over again, with different spells being acquired, different monsters coming into play. And basically, also another interesting thing is that the game does not overstay its welcome, because it doesn't take too many turns, so it plays in under an hour. But again, in that under an hour, you've seen a progression from a group of cultists that are going around and trying to do their basic cultist stuff to the biggest horrors entering the world and going around and stomping around and destroying stuff. And the game has other interesting balancing self-regulating mechanics. You perform the ritual Annihilation that costs power, so you won't be able to do much. You score maybe a lot of points, but you won't be able to do much that turn, and the opponent can do more. But then maybe because of that, you have fewer points. You're going to burn them, so that imposes that burden and extra cost on the other player that the player has to face when you get rid of all of your points early on. So there are interesting ideas here, the interesting gameplay that I found enjoyable. Although you handle the general script differently from game to game, however, these two parties, these two factions, they definitely have specific styles of gameplay. So I do wonder if after a while the game will start feeling stale. I do worry about the replay value of the game in not even the long run, but the middle run. From the rule book, it looks like they will release other factions that still can be used for this one. So it's always two at a time, but you can switch those two. And I think that would really help the game stay fresh. I enjoy the idea of the giant monsters on the board, and yet that's one aspect of production that I'm not particularly crazy about. I think I would prefer to at least have the option, of having flat tokens for everything and everybody. Heck, maybe you can have just, flat cultists and then slightly thicker cylinders for the monsters, and Cthulhu would be a taller wooden cylinder with a sticker on top, and then the star spawns a little shorter, and the cultists are just the cardboard. This way you still have that hierarchy. At a glance you can tell, hey, I'm taller than you, so that matters something, and that means something in the game, which actually it does, because certain monsters will protect cultists, blah blah blah. So you would have, hey, I'm still taller than you, but at a glance, you always see everybody. You don't have to wonder. You're not going to bump down a unit as you touch another one, and then you pick it up, and in so doing, you hit another one and it falls. Look, when you look at the picture, it looks good. If I take pictures of the board as I'm playing it, it looks great. From time to time, as I play the game, the pretty standees just get in the way, and to me that's a limitation. So there are some minor elements here and there. I wish there were more player aids, but again, this is an early copy. The final production may look different, may have those things. In general, I'm pleased. Mind you, I'm pleased with this game. I think it's a strong game. It's an area control that develops with different phases and different priorities, so it keeps the game fresh as it goes. It gives a different identity to different parts of the game. I'm always happy to play games with a Lovecraftian theme, because I'm a huge fan of the original author and of the genre. And from time to time is nice, you know, just to be the bad guys. So in general, Cthulhu Wars Duel, I find to be a pleasant area control game with a fun theme, a fun implementation of the theme, enjoyable asymmetrical gameplay, and from time to time some interesting brutal battles. There are minor things here and there, as I mentioned, but nothing that is a deal breaker or a game breaker. In general, this is a pretty good game.